on autopilot. Well, good morning. This is the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jen. I'm joined today by Ian, Paul, and we've got Ken, who is actually on the road, but he recorded his answers to some of the questions. So we've got a full house today. We're talking about content writing, and not the actual writing of the content or what you should do to write the content or what you should map out. But if you have decided it's time to get a content writer, a professional writer, to help with your company's blogs, your newsletters, your technical documentation, your white papers, anything that requires the written word, you've decided, you know what, either we don't have the talent internally, or this is a real skill that we need some professional help with. And what would be the first step to go out and find that content writer and have them help us produce a lot of content for our business? So that's the topic today. We'll go through how you actually go about finding a writer. So we'll intersperse content writer, professional writer. We mean all the same thing. And we'll talk about how it is to find the writer, what you might want to do in order to vet the writer. So I guess some more stories, because we always have these stories about what went wrong with certain writers, just like any other profession, right? When you're hiring someone to help you with a project, your interpretation of what the end result is and theirs sometimes can be very different. So we got to make sure that you guys are on the same page about that. And we'll give you tips and hints and practical ways to go about that. So with that, I am going to start my first question with Ian. So Ian, can you talk a little bit more about what is content writing and how it can help a small business?
Sure thing. Yeah, content writing is super important. We've talked about in the past that for small businesses, for any size businesses, but since we're talking about small businesses, you as the business owner are the expert in the field, and you need to convey your views to the world. But content also helps to connect with your customers on a personal level. You form a connection with them that can lead to repeat business. It can also be used as a powerful marketing tool, driving traffic to the business's website and helping convert leads into sales. Really, at its heart, content writing is the process of planning, researching, writing, editing, and publishing content for digital or even offline distribution and consumption. Simply put, it's really storytelling, right? You're trying to invite your reader into the story so that they can move through the buying journey. That's your intent as a business, usually with content. And just to kind of share what types of content are very common, things like, we're talking about things like blog posts, videos, because you need a script usually, podcast scripts, white papers, press releases, descriptions for your business that would go on, directory listings or Google business profiles, products and services, descriptions of those, landing pages, website copy, social media. We've talked about how content is the fuel that runs your marketing engine or keeps your marketing engine going. So it's super, super important. Just think about it. Without well-written content that moves your readers to act, your efforts, they'll be lackluster, right? We've all seen blog posts, we've all seen videos, we've all been to websites, we've read descriptions of companies, even ad copy that's just not compelling in any way. And I think it's actually even more prevalent today because people try to take shortcuts with content because content can be expensive, right? So one of the shortcuts people are using is they use, Paul, you might be able to tell me, I always think of it as calling content spinning, where you basically put it into an engine and it spits out kind of this rewritten form of the content, which is really bad. Like everything's bad about it. And then on the other side, you have AI now, which is almost like a content spinner that's going out, finding articles and stuff that are relevant to what you're trying to talk about. But again, it's really hard to replace a good content writer.
And I think Google is getting smarter about those content spinners and the AI. If anyone knows anything about AI, it's Google.
Yeah.
Their AI is perfect. Just ask them. They never make a mistake.
Yeah, it's hard. Content is all about a relationship, right? You're trying to convey meaning to someone.
Mhm.
You're trying to convey something that's helpful and useful, insightful, things that inspire and move people, and to move them to action predominantly in some form, right? So it's pretty hard at this point, anyways, for a machine to do that well. So that's where the content writer is so vital to this, because that's their superpower. We all have kind of superpowers of job skills, and
Yeah.
writers can do it faster, better. It's amazing to watch good content writers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where it comes in. It's so important to have your personas worked out too, because sometimes we find when business owners say they like to write, say they're, so they're not in the camp that's just like, oh my goodness, I see a blank page, I don't know how to express it, right? Say they're good at it. Oftentimes what you find, they're coming and explaining their product or their service or their business from their point of view. Which is fine, but that's not fine for if you're trying to meet someone, a potential customer, where they're at with their own, say, limited knowledge compared to you about your products, your services, their hesitations, what they're really responsible for. So a good content writer will be able to write in those different personas and meet that person where they're at, educate them, answer those kind of questions. And that kind of stuff just might fly over the radar of the business owner, because you're just in it every single day, right? You forget what you know.
Right. Yeah, I like to say, because I have lots of business owners who say, oh, I'm a good writer, or I'm good at social media, or whatever it is, kind of, where their interest lies.
Yeah.
And one of the conversations I like to have with them is first of all, there's people that have this superpower that will free you up. The second point is, you will be the highest paid copywriter in the world because you should be doing, $1,000 per hour work rather than, $50 per hour work, or whatever it is that you would hire a writer for.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, unless your business is, content writing for others, your focus should be on running or the growing of the business, right? Regardless if you love to write. So yeah, that can be a task that's hard to pry out of the hands of the business owner. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
We're going to go to Ken in the field, as it were. Ken's going to answer the question, why should you consider hiring a content writer? And how much should you expect to pay a content writer? So with that, let's go to a recording Ken has done for us.
So I think you want to think about hiring a content writer the same way you're going to think about outsourcing any other position. Really, it comes down to, does it make sense to hire somebody for their expertise and efficiency? Because that may ultimately and probably will save you time and money, and certainly a lot of headaches. So I think when you're thinking about a content writer, you always want to look at, does this free me up to go work on the things that only I can uniquely do? One. Two, how does a professional writer help me? Well, typically they're very efficient and very effective at what they do. So they can write content and turn it out in a quality manner faster than most people. And so it's going to save you time and money. Content writers also know how to write, for the reader. And so you want to really focus on readership, because while, we talk about this whole concept of search engine optimization, ultimately it's the user experience that Google cares about. And, you always want to write for a human, but realize that Google is going to crawl the content. So your content writer will also know how to structure that content to help you incorporate some SEO best practices. At least they should. If they don't, I would tell you need to look for a different writer if search engine optimization is a big objective for you. Not all content needs to be written for search engine optimization. Some of it is, for brochures or offline, printed materials. Maybe even some things, like case studies or things like that, you may or may not want to have publicly available, but you may want to give to your sales team So, content writers can tackle that challenge for you, and they know how to write it and they know how to structure it. So, I think it's also important to realize that they bring a different viewpoint to what you're typically going to be thinking about in the business. It's really easy for us to get trapped in this technical jargon that we all tend to use within, our own specific industries. And while that can be a very effective thing written for a specific target audience, many times the audience is, they don't know the technical jargon, or the gobbledygook that we tend to toss around. And so having a content writer being able to write for somebody from a fresh perspective, targeting a specific audience, I think is a very powerful thing. Now, when it comes to how much should you expect to pay a content writer, I mean, this is going to vary widely based on expertise, based on, the amount of content that you're going to be asking them to provide, whether it's ongoing recurring content, like are they going to be writing X number of blog posts for you every month, how much research is going to need to be done. If you're writing informational blog posts that just need to convey factual information, but don't require deep research, that's a completely different cost structure than somebody who needs to go in, spend hours researching topics, finding, sources, being able to do, source attributions and really build, a strong case with the article that they create. You've got technical writers, people who write very technical language. You've got people who specialize, like in the financial services industry, the medical industry, technical, like computer science or, artificial intelligence, manufacturing. They all have different requirements, and have, really, it's beneficial to have somebody who's written in those worlds before. Typically, if you're writing that very technical content, you also need to think about, you've got content writers who are really focused on producing, a certain amount of content on a regular basis. But then you also have writers who need to persuade and get people to buy, what we refer to as a copywriter. Two completely different skill sets. You're going to pay different prices for these folks. Copywriters, a good copywriter can generate a lot of sales based on the quality of the writing that they do. A content writer might just be assigned to go write an informational blog post about, a variety of topics, depending on the nature of your business, that don't require massive amounts of research, and they don't require a lot of persuasion. They're really just there to provide good, solid quality content.
Great. Very thorough answer. Absolutely. One of the things I want to jump in on there is how to pay the writer. I just want to share some of our experience, if this can help you. What I have done, and now, okay, so this is what has worked for us and some of our writers is there's a couple different things. Some writers will come and say, it's an hourly rate. Others will say it's by the word. What we typically like to do is do a flat rate, and here's why. So if let's assume we have sold in a marketing program, and it's say let's just call it 2 blogs a month that we're asking for the writer to write. Now, what we do is make a contract with the writer once we find the good one, and we say, okay, so it's 2 blogs per month that are due at this point in time throughout the month. Here's the content calendar, so you know what you're going to be writing each month, and it's a flat rate, and we'll pay you on this date, and away we go. And what has seemed to be positive about doing things that way, and this is feedback from the writers, is that I know when I'm getting paid, so my own business, my own cash flow works well. My pay is not determined on when the client, approves the piece of work, because that's always that, that can be a variable, right? A client delays approving because they're busy with their own stuff for a week or two, and then that delays the writer as well. So we work on flat rate, X amount every month for X amount of work, basically regardless of how fast or slow the client is approving the work. And then with the understanding that there are, however many revisions that we agree to before the contract starts. Typically what we found is some in this situation, some of the blog posts will come by. First draft is beautiful and away we go. And then of course, Murphy's Law, you get that one blog post that requires, 4 or 5 redos just because of a concept is not hitting right. So by and large, our writers seem to really enjoy that. They know what they're getting paid. They don't have to keep track of their hours. They can focus on their craft, the work. And what we found too is if they have any ideas as they get to know the client, the business, the industry, they will come with their own ideas as well about, hey, there might be a hole in the content calendar about this. How about a few blog posts on this subject? And it really encourages them to help you with those ideas. Just think if they get that idea, a Saturday morning, maybe, these 3 or 4 blog posts could be in addition to what the client is already writing. You want that happening. You don't want the writer to feel penalized for that and it took me 10 minutes to think of those ideas. Should I put that down in a timesheet? You want to eliminate that. You want to obviously pay fairly, but what you're really after is the magic and the skill of the writer to help your client, or in your case, help you with your business writing and the promotion and the information out there about your product or service. So that's one way we do it. If that can help you, take it for what it's worth. On that, I want to go to Paul now. So we talk about content writers, we're talking about paying them, we're talking about how valuable they are. So they sound amazing. So where do we go and find these quality writers?
Yeah, so I want to touch on a couple things. This is a good topic because a couple things that have been mentioned. There is a difference between copywriting and content writing. And that's an important distinction that I think a lot of people don't realize. And a lot of times, I think it was Ian mentioned that business owners, that they're going to write their own blog posts. It's like you really shouldn't be doing that because you're going to tend to write for other people in the industry, not your audience. And sometimes people think they're good at something and they're not. My background is more technical and I can figure out a lot of things. Okay, writing is not one of them. I'm not a good writer and I know that. And so, know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are. And as far as finding one, if you can get referrals, that's probably the best in my opinion. There's job boards, things like Craigslist and Indeed. There's also things like Upwork. I think there's a website called HireWriter. There's Fiverr. I don't want to get in trouble here, but in my experience, Upwork, you're going to get higher quality. You're going to pay more, but you're going to get higher quality. So, yeah, I think referrals are the best because now you have someone saying, I've worked with this person. I know the quality of their work and here's what, and they may be able to tell you here's what they're good at. Here's what they're not good at. They're good at this, they're good at writing general content, but if you need SEO baked into this, you might want to talk to this other person over here. You might have 2 or 3 content writers that do 2 or 3 different things for you. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We found that split, particularly B2B versus B2C. So B2B generally, more serious. Of course, B2B can be fun, and then on the B2C side, so business to consumer, so consumer focused products, services, food, fashion, makeup, tools, stuff like that. Anything that a consumer can buy for themselves. It typically a little lighter, maybe a little more fun in the writing, and typically the one writer cannot be fun and serious in their writing at the same time. So it's a good point.
A technical writer probably wouldn't be a good fit for a surf shop.
Probably not, or selling Doritos. Yeah,
exactly.
Probably not. But then also too, even within, like, I'll stick to B2B, even within B2B, if it's time to get a white paper written, that's a whole different kind of project. That's a whole different type of writer than your typical writer that perhaps is doing your weekly blog post for you. Sometimes not. Most of the time, it really is. So just do understand that just because someone's a writer doesn't mean that they can, write A to Z, everything that you need, or A to Z for our non-Canadians. Ian, I want to go to you. Oh,
Sure.
You want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's important to also say that just like with most things in life, copywriting and content writing are a continuum. It's not a hard stop. So copywriting is usually about persuasion. Content writing is usually about informing and entertaining, right? Or educating. and I think you can find people that are extremely good content writers that also are able to persuade, because it's a learned skill. And I think as long as you can help them understand and brief them in appropriately, I think at least my experience is that they can create good copy for ads. They can do, because regardless of if you're educating, you're always trying to persuade as well at the end of a blog post, because you're trying to, here we're educating and informing you about something. By the way, if you need our help in this, here's what to do, right? So there's always some sort of persuasion involved in that as well. So I think it's important to remember it's a continuum. It's not a, this is my box. And some people are like that, but I think in the broader world, it's more, they land here, they land here, they land here, right? So
yeah, that's a good point. That leads well into my next question for you. So what should a good content writer job description include? Like, how do you get what you need when perhaps you're not really sure how to ask for it? Yeah. What if someone who's listening today is just new to the fact that there's like a content writer, there's copywriters, I just thought there was, business writers. So how would you go about explaining that?
Yeah. And I think it's actually a funny question too, because I think a good job description should be written by a content writer. I honestly, like, I think there's good. An art and a skill, because all of us who have ever looked for jobs or had to create job descriptions or job postings know that there's the world of buttoned up, here's the job description. It's bullet points. It's totally sterile. You're like, okay, I can do all that. And the company seems good, but like to understand its culture and what makes it special and what it would be like to work there, you either have to wait for the interview or you have to go to their, do some exploring on social media and that kind of stuff. But I think a great content writer can actually create a story. Again, we talked about, drawing people into a story. If you can draw somebody, even when you're looking for a good content writer, into the story of why it would be great to work with you, you're already reducing barriers. You're creating an affinity. So I thought that was worth saying.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And we haven't, excuse me, cough drop. All right. We haven't really talked about, that business owners need to, first of all, understand why they need a content writer. We talked a little bit about that, but the world or the playing field within which a content writer lives. So I thought it was worth just at least putting out there that you need a content marketing plan or a content plan. And that content plan is informed and driven by your strategic marketing plan. Like, it all comes down. And without that, what's going to guide and determine what kind of content you should actually be writing? It's the plan, right? And so when you do that, you actually, you create a free and open space for your content writers to flourish. And I think that's really important because, you need to create the environment where they can be successful. And the plan defines what content needs to be created, why it needs to be created, and who you're creating it for, right? You talked about personas earlier, but where do the personas come from? Well, you have to have a strategic marketing plan to determine that. So again, this is really crucial. And if you don't have that, you probably shouldn't be hiring a content writer until you get that in place. Because if you put this, if you hire before you do the planning, you're going to hit some significant issues. Now that you have a content plan that's being created and aligns to your strategic marketing plan, I think you can create a job description for hiring a content writer.
Where do you get the content writer to write that?
Hopefully you already have one, but do your best. Do your best. Look online at other descriptions, right? It's night and day when you see well-written stuff versus poor job descriptions. I didn't use the term boring before. Most job descriptions are exceedingly boring because they're not written well. So set yourself apart. Make sure it aligns with, it humanizes the process. Share your vision, your mission, and your culture. Unless it's just a transactional relationship. Jen, we work in a similar way where it's really project-based work, but the people that we're hiring, they are part of our culture because we're doing team meetings where, they might be, meeting with our clients. I think that part's really important. But now let's drill down. That was a lot of preface. Your job description should have an overview though. And I think it should have something like this. What does success look like in this role? How will they directly contribute to the success of the business? And how will the business directly contribute to their flourishing as a content writer and moving them forward in their career? Because I think that's the biggest, if you can connect there, that everything else follows, and then it gets into the nitty-gritty. Like, what kind of content are they going to be writing? We've talked a lot about how there's different types of content. So be specific. What's the goal of the content? What stage of the marketing hourglass will they be creating content for? Is it one specific? Is it across all of the stages? Is it to attract attention to the business, the product or service, or is it to help close the sale? Is it to improve search engine rankings like you guys talked about? Is it to build the brand or share the culture? And then define the requirements. Do they need specialized knowledge or skill or experience in dental writing, financial writing, IT writing, whatever it is, roofing writing, you name it. And should they have specific skills like writing for search engines, understanding social media, maybe even experience writing for younger generations, whatever it is. And then you need to define.
Just put something stupid on TikTok for the younger generation. That'll solve that problem.
No comment.
That's a different episode. You keep coming up
That's
with
right.
these great episodes. That's a different episode.
I think you also need to define what a normal work or assignment looks like. Is there a typical length of content? Will they collaborate on projects with other people, other writers? What's the editorial or approval process internally and externally? You're trying to shape it. Some of this you might save for the interview, or some of it you might put right in there in the description. Are the topics assigned, or can they pitch ideas? Jen, you talked about, when you have a great relationship with a content writer, you may have the structure of here's the topics that are driven by our search engine optimization and what gaps we have. But a great content writer is engaged and they're looking around and they're like, hey, we don't have, for a dentist, hey, we haven't written about sleep apnea or something like that. It's an opportunity. Yeah. Some writers, we don't see this too much in our world, but in some contexts, some writers want their byline or their public recognition attached to stuff. So even though you're writing for your business, it could be written by, this person's name, and then they could link to it and have, use that as part of their portfolio. Almost done, guys. I know this is super long, but it's a job description. There's lots of detail. Work expectations and timing. Are they what we talked about, project based, or are they expected to work a certain amount of time each week? Like, what's their work arrangements? What's the expected turnaround time on projects? And some of this, of course, is defined within an actual project brief when you do the projects, but broader context, it's helpful for them to know. Do they have to work during your office hours, or is there flexibility? Do they need to work in your office on site, or is it virtual? And then, of course, I think you have to be very clear about compensation. What's your, oftentimes, if you include what you're willing to pay in a job description or this type of description, it would be a range usually. And you would have to research that a little bit. And then, are there other benefits or bonuses related to compensation? How often do you pay? What payment vehicles do you use? Can it work for them? Check, e-transfer, PayPal. Do you deduct taxes? And then do they have to use their own equipment, or do you cover the equipment? So there's, obviously lots of things involved when you're trying to attract good people, but certainly that gives you a very in-depth idea of, the elements that you would need.
That's great. Yeah. And that's the point. It's not as easy as just, going and finding a writer. You brought up some good points there about the collaboration versus the non-collaboration. And I just wanted to share some of the stuff that we do, or some of the stuff that we've found. So we found as well, if you want the writer to be interviewing any of your subject matter experts, any of your executives in your organization, that again is a different type. Well, I don't know if it's a different type of writer, but it's definitely a different type of personality. Because when I have been choosing writers, I will say, we have some work where we can just, send you the content, and it's up to you to, make it into a well-written article. Other times you're going to have to be speaking with the executive to, pull out the information, because we're doing either thought leadership, or we've got some other goal in mind for that company's content. And I noticed there really is a divide. Some writers are like, great, yeah, it'd be great to hear everything from the horse's mouth, and just, really be able to interview and then make that into to an article. And others want nothing to do with that. They're just like, give me the information and let me just, get it to you. Another experience.
There's a real strength to that, right? If a writer can interview the subject matter expert, they can draw out the person's point of view, as well as the tone of voice. You might have a corporate tone of voice, but you might also have a tone of voice for that particular subject matter expert.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Helping someone find their voice in the written content. That's it is. It's quite a skill. It's very interesting what you said. We haven't experienced this, because when we have done anything with professional writers, content writers, it has always been, I guess, in a ghostwriting capacity. So, I mean, the client obviously knows we have professional writers, but everything that goes out online is, and the byline is that professional, that executive, that company. And that's the way we've done it. So we haven't had a situation where the actual content writer wants their name on it. So that's a new thing for me. So does that come about in specific industries where there's just, a real specialized body of knowledge that the writer wants credit for?
Where I've seen it is in the corporate environment, but I think it's equally applicable to small businesses where you're actually hiring a writer versus having a contracted writer or an agency with writers do it, where you are doing that ghostwriting methodology. But in a business environment where you're actually hiring someone, I think there is opportunity to add them in as almost like a subject matter expert. They're the person gathering the information, or a research writer, or whatever you want to position them as. But they can then become a persona unto themselves within that business.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I haven't experienced that. That's good. Thank you. Okay, next question. We're going to go over to Ken. And the question we've got for him is, how do you properly screen content writing candidates, and what should you avoid? So now we've got our short list. Ken, what are we going to do?
Okay, so fortunately, this is something that I haven't had to do for quite a while because we've had a really great team of writers for us for quite a while. But thinking back about when we did have to go look for a content writer, um, it's just like anything. I mean, you have to go through a certain process. Now, one of the things I want to stress here is the quality of the writing that you're going to get is going to be in large part based on the content brief that you provide. The How much information can you give somebody? Who's the ideal target audience for that particular writing piece? Do you have samples of other works that you like? Are there any technical jargon or terms that they need to become familiar with? Do they need to have experience writing, in a particular niche or background? Do they need to be able to write in American English or British English or, whatever language you might need? All of these things you need to ask about and go through the process. So I think it's really important. If you're using, there are a whole host of great solutions that are out there. There are places where you can go find writers and you can go scan the inventory of writers that they've already vetted for you at a certain level, which I think is a really good first step. Go take advantage of those types of solutions. Then, go through and select a couple of writers and ask them to give you some samples of their work. In some cases, if you're using a platform like Writer Access, for example, that manages this whole process for you, they're probably going to give you samples of the writing that somebody has already done. They're going to already tell you, hey, this person wrote in the financial services industry, or they wrote in the medical industry, or whatever. You can specify sometimes where they reside. So if it's really important for you to have a specific, like if your audience is in Canada, having somebody who can write using the nuances of the language, so that it looks like it's written by somebody from Canada. I think that that's really important. You can interview people. Many times though, it's really just getting examples of their work. You can, like I said, I think it's a good idea to farm this out. I think you definitely want to use a system that's going to help you manage the process to select the right writer or writers for you. I love these content type of platforms because you can go in and you can save your favorites. You can then start to work with them, and they know that you're going to have a certain amount of content coming to them on a regular basis. But if you're going to hire somebody off of, more of a pure freelance kind of environment, definitely ask for samples. You might want to actually interview those folks because they haven't gone through the quality of the vetting process that some of these content platforms like a Writer Access, or others that are out there have already put people through. And I think you definitely need to find out how many revisions you get. With each article, you need to find out what price they're going to charge. How do they charge? Do they charge by article? Do they charge by word? Is it a flat fee based on the type of writing product that they're going to deliver for you? Do they how experienced are they with really truly understanding search engine optimization and writing content that's well structured for search? Look, a lot of people can say they can do it. That doesn't mean that they can do it. They may be able to do some good surface level stuff, but again, you definitely want to go through a vetting process. And I think it needs to align with the type of content that you're going to need. So if you're asking for a technical paper or, or a case study, look for people who have got experience doing that. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be doing X number of blog posts for you every month, look at somebody who's done that, get samples, check and see if are they in the right specialization in terms of what they've already written on. And in some cases, that's not super important. I mean, if there's not a lot of technical jargon that needs to be used, then you might find a really good writer who can write across several different industries, but you just need to go through the testing process.
And Jen,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Ken makes a good point about going through the testing process, because even though there might be other clients, other folks that say this, or your other colleagues that say this writer is great, they might not be great for your work. So just do understand it's not a silver bullet, and to go through a couple of different writers it's not unusual. It's not unusual. And the other thing too, the writer, as skilled as they come, they still have to get to know your voice, your company's voice, your products, the way you want it explained. So there is going to be, a little bit of a learning curve there, no matter how skilled they are. So they can start to align with I guess your brand, your tone, and how you want your content out there.
Yeah. The thing that jumped out to me, because I've seen it when it goes wrong, is the content brief. He mentioned the content brief, and I think that should never be underestimated, because it's a scenario of garbage in, garbage out, or a lack of clarity in, a lack of clarity out, right? So your content brief is so vital, and this is true of any creative environment, whether it's with graphic designers, web developers, but specifically for content writers, you absolutely have to really outline well what is expected of them, what the topic is, what the call to actions are, who the audience is, what the point of view, right? Like there's just some really key elements that if you don't explain them well, if you don't put enough effort into this is where I've seen it, especially in the corporate world, where our teams were pumping, we had 4 content writers on staff, and we were just pumping out content, right, from all sorts of different subject matter experts and branding focuses. And because it was like a machine, you really saw when the machine got gummed up because somebody shortchanged the briefing process. So the writer went down one path, it comes back, this is totally wrong, right? And if the person had just taken a little bit more effort, sometimes it's appropriate to have a briefing meeting, right? Where the writer can ask you questions and dig a little bit deeper, because they're the ones that are already getting into the frame of mind of how do I do this, right? So that's so the brief is so important.
Yeah, it really is. And even just for our listeners, don't get intimidated by this content brief. It's okay to say, okay, at the end of the day, we're trying to sell ABC. I'm not really sure what, what maybe you're not even sure what the point is. Or you're like, I don't even know what else you need to know. Like, we're better than these competitors, and we need to sell more, right? So even if you're very inexperienced giving the briefing, I think your idea with the briefing meeting is ideal, because you can just say, I'm not really sure what you need to know. I just, we just need this done. We just need more sales. And then from there, the content writer can go, oh, okay, well, why are you really different than, this company? What's so good about it? Why can't you sell more? And in order to get more of your point of view, that can be very helpful, because remember, we are hiring writers, not mind readers, as much as we we wish they were. Point. We wish they were. You're a professional. You figured it out, right? That doesn't work so well, unfortunately. Okay, Paul, talk to us about how to get the most value out of a content writer. Let's say you've gone through this whole process. You found your 1 or your 2 or your 3 or however many you need to help your company. how do you keep that relationship going? How do you get great content continuously out of them?
Crack the whip. No, I think it's important to have a contract in place, first of all. You have to start with that. And, you know, communication is important, especially if they're working virtual, which a lot of people are now. Because, you know, if you're in an office, there's a good chance you're going to be talking to these people every day, every other day. But if it's a virtual environment, if they're working remotely, you may only talk to them once a week. So, you know, communication gets really important, and clear, straightforward communication. And you have to have a process in place that includes deadlines for drafts and revisions. If you're going through this testing phase that Ken talked about, you can time box things, which means you say, okay, you have this amount of time to do this or for this project. And, you know, you talked about the way you price things, Jen, and I think that's important because if you pay by the word or by the hour, that gives them a very strong incentive. So, well, gee, it took me 6 hours to do this research, you know. Or if you're paying by the word, we've all seen blog posts where it's just there's words stuffed in there and it's obvious. And it's like, okay, they must have got paid by the word because they just stuck words in there to stick words in there because they get paid by the word. So, because back to the time, especially if you're paying hourly, you know, time boxing is important. And, you know, we've talked about the content brief, and depending on the complexity of the subject, that can make the content brief longer and more involved. And this is one of the reasons content is expensive. There's a lot of things that goes into the preparation of that content before it's written that, you know, a lot of people don't realize these things have to be done if you want quality content. So, and once you find a writer that like knows your corporate tone, can write for these different industries, then, you know, goes back to communication. You need to have regular meetings, especially if they're working remotely, and you have to stay on the same page, so to speak, I guess is the best way to put that. They have to understand what you need and what your expectations are from them.
I love your communication focus there, Paul, because, you know, one of the pieces of communication that often gets overlooked, especially with remote workers, is the feedback part, right? Where
Right.
unless it's negative feedback, like, you didn't do it right, do it again, right?
Yeah.
But I think the coaching, mentoring, feedback, and encouragement parts of that are so important because you're not trying to just it's not just transactional. You're trying to create a team that can produce better and better results each time. So that takes work, though, takes effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point too, Ian. Even if the client comes back and says, "Oh, that was a good job," or there's really no feedback other than yes, approved. I mean, that's music to a writer's ears. Like, okay, I did that one right. I got the voice right. Okay, that's great. So that's really important because you have to keep in mind too, unless this writer is full-time 100% with you, they have other clients to serve, other points of view, other voices, other personas they're writing for. So it's unfair to assume that they're going to keep this all in their head, right? So when they nail it with your writing, be sure to give that feedback so they can do more of that, and better next time. We had a good situation that happened recently. So we have one writer on this one client, and has been writing, I just want to think here, probably since April. Feedback has been good consistently. And then the client just mentioned, I guess a couple of weeks ago, really like really can see the writer getting better and better. And their feedback has always been, okay, good. So it was interesting to hear that because I was like, oh, okay, so improving as well. So that's a great thing too. The writer is feeling that they're nailing it, they're on the mark, and they're just getting better and better, it would seem. So that positive reinforcement is so very important. So thanks for bringing that up.
I had the pleasure of being able to share feedback to our main writer on our team. That in this particular case, she does a lot of different content writing for us. But in this particular case, it was related to monthly e-newsletters for one of our dental clients. And the highest praise I've probably ever heard from a client was, first of all, yes, the writing is incredible, but that they felt great that because it's written in the voice of the dentist, and they felt like it was better than they could do, and they were proud of these e-newsletters that were going out in their name with their name on the bottom of that letter, because there's an intro letter in these that she gets very creative with, and so being able to share that back to the writer was just like, brightened up her day, keeps her inspired. Yeah, it's very cool.
Oh, very good. Very good. Absolutely. And then, on the other side, when there is feedback, so negative feedback, it's got to be as specific as possible. I just sigh here because we're going through this right now. Having your track changes in the margins saying, not what I meant. We're like, okay, what did you mean? And even if I think that kind of feedback, if we can discuss it, is great, because it's showing if there was an interview, this is what was heard or this is what was said. So it's there in the article, and the subject matter expert is going, okay, that's not what I meant. Okay, so that's going to further help clarify the subject matter experts' thinking, way it's expressed, what they meant to say. So, I mean, even that negative feedback there it's not really negative. You're right. You're getting to the clearer and clearer point of the article. But not what I meant is it's not feedback. It's not helpful, because there's nothing that can be done with that. So as much as possible, articulate what is wrong. And if you can't really figure out what is wrong, that's another time to use your idea of the content briefing meeting, or maybe it's a revision meeting you were talking about, Ian, and get the subject matter expert to say, like, this part's not going what I meant. What I meant was this, or what I'm kind of thinking is this. And, them and the writer can wrestle through getting the clarity there. So, and then that just, helps for next time. So, so even the negative stuff is not, it's not the end of the world. It's just got to be, clearly given. So,
yeah. And I'm a recovering perfectionist. So,
how are you?
Hello, my name's Ian. I'm a recovering perfectionist. But I would just say, for all those perfectionists out there, meaning business owners, it's not about perfection. Like any creative process is not about perfection. It's about getting it to the 80% finish line, right? So that you can get it out into the wild and learn from it. But if you wait for that additional, like if you keep going back for revisions because something might just be, not, you're just being too perfectionist, remember that the writer is very good at what they do. And in all likelihood, you're really focusing on something that's not going to give you any return on investment, right? So you need to be careful of that.
Yeah, very
Perfection
good
is the enemy of progress.
Very
there
good
we
point.
go. And done. Yeah.
And done. Just kind of like this podcast, guys. I think this is a great place to wrap up. To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Please like and share our podcast. Please subscribe to it and help us get the word out. Tell a fellow business owner about this show. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Toodles.